The Building Better Relationships Journal and Meditation. We created the Building Better Relationships Journal and Meditation so you can magnetize the better relationships you want and focus on the positive role that you have in creating a better life through your relationships. We are excited for you to discover the gold within you that can help you manifest the love we all crave. The Building Better Relationships Journal has coaching questions that help you listen to the truth of what you want and what helps you to be empowered in love. The Building Better Relationships meditation is designed to strengthen your heart's ability to be that change you wish to see in the world. Why not download it now and think of it as a gift to those you love? If you love journaling and meditation, this is for you. Welcome to Building Better Relationships at Home and at Work with Angela and Patty podcast. This is Patty, a leadership and work-life balance coach from Arizona, USA.
And this is Angela, love and relationship coach from Sydney, Australia. And we are building better relationships with you.
Sharing new perspectives on being heart-centered at home and at work.
So you can draw on your inner power to make your relationships and the world a better place to be around.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Patty.
Hi, Angela.
Good to be back with you in this new year.
Yeah, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Yeah. For some reason, even though the world is looking crazy and weird, I'm actually feeling a lot of positive energy right now. And also building better relationships. Our podcast is about that, about bringing positive energy, not from a Pollyanna place, but from a place of if we connect to that heart within, we can actually create a different way of relating to each other in our home environments, in our work environments. And I know, Patty, this year, I have got a few topics coming this year that I want to rack your brains about, because I know a lot of people are struggling in the work front because of the changes with AI, the changes in the economy, the changes in geopolitics. Everything's changing. Being heart-centered in that place can seem like an oxymoron, but I'm sure in our podcast, Building Better Relationships, it's about striving for being yourself authentically versus seeing the outer world and being overwhelmed what people see in the world.
Which is going to go into our topic that we're going to talk about today.
Exactly.
So I'm going to ask the audience a question. Have you ever felt so overwhelmed that you shut down? I know I have many, many times. This question speaks to what so many people experience but rarely name. And that's being flooded in the inside while appearing fine on the outside. Have you ever experienced that, Angela?
Yes, I could probably say most of my life, up until, 10 years ago, maybe. So this was a constant state. I think I was raised in a family where this was normal. And I don't know if my family wanted me to shut down. I think they wanted me to fight, but we'll talk about this later because I talk about the nervous system responses. Mm-hmm. But I think this was a normal way of being for me, and maybe a reason I went into relationship coaching, to learn how, firstly through the relationship with my freaking out, overwhelmed habits of being, how to be something else, because it was my way of being. And what about you, Patty? Have you?
I'm the type of person that I'll shove things down and shove things down and shove things down, and then I explode because I'm overwhelmed. I push it down, and then all of a sudden I can't get it out the way that it should be experienced.
Should be by the other people around you.
Yeah. So we're
So,
going to talk a little bit about that too.
yes. And the title of this podcast is Overwhelmed Inside, but Guarded Outside. We shut down and disconnect from others because of the overwhelm. And we're going to look at how this happens. And if we look at our society, a lot of people, they talk about the next generations not being able to have relationships, and they kind of blame them. But really, it's actually a response as a culture where there's too much going on, too much stimulation, too much change, too much conflict. So that status of overwhelm leads to shutdown. And because of my family, thank you, family, I understand this really deeply why it leads to shutdown. The concern is, say, for our next generations, if they're not having relationships, if they're choosing not to connect, and it's easy to stay at home and just binge on Netflix or on your phone, that's going to lead to a cultural change of disconnecting through with intimacy, or just it's the new norm. You don't have to have intimacy with a person or with others in your family or with people in general. This is actually a process happening in our culture, but today we're looking at more how it happens in you or in us. And we're going to share a few examples in the home environment and the workplace. And I just wanted to share briefly on, we use that term flooded because it is a term that has come up with autism. A lot of people who are on the spectrum, also ADHD spectrum, or they have anxiety as well. I think I grew up with a sort of average level of anxiety in my family. But this term flooding, so what it looks like, people on the spectrum describe it really well. And that's one of the gifts of people who are neurodiverse. They can articulate these experiences in the nervous system really well because it takes over their way of functioning, or it's so strong and they can describe it really well. So it's actually a physical and a psychological response. It's twofold, where the nerves and the thoughts are hyperstimulated and there's too much information going back and forth through the body. So sometimes you won't be able to talk, you can't think, you can't respond. People who have flooding experiences actually describe it like they can hear someone speaking, but they actually don't register the words. And it can also be a physiological response of shaking. You can have tears, so you can have a flooding of the water flowing out of your body. And then consequently, you can have a shutdown. So the flooding can lead to flipping of the switch of the nervous system. So you flood the nervous system with feelings, sensations, emotions, and then you go to shutdown where you feel numbness. It's a fairly standard way for us to disconnect from intimacy, because if you think about flooding, it gives a great example physically of why we would shut down. Once you've had that emotional flooding, you may be able to disconnect in the moment from what people are saying, but also the nervous system gets overwhelmed and then it just shuts down naturally. In today's episode, we're going to look at various ways to recognize the behavior. You may not have the extreme parts of flooding, but we have subtle aspects of flooding all the time in our body, and it's actually a healthy response. So I think overwhelm has been misinterpreted these days because we measure ourselves by society. We're not keeping up. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so busy. And so sometimes we think we're failing, whereas today I would hope that we can have a shift in that perspective and look at overwhelm as a function of the body, as a body responding to something's not able to be processed in the environment. And then if we're disconnecting from intimacy, that's a clue that we need to start reconnecting. Did you want to share on anything I just shared about what's coming up for you when I
Yeah.
look?
This may look like you're present physically, but emotionally checked out. How many of us have done that where you just emotionally just feel like you just don't want to be here, you just don't want to do it, and you check out? You may want a connection, but you don't have the energy to explain how you feel. You may say, I'm fine, when you're really not, but this may be a protective response because you don't want to share that you're not okay, that things aren't what you want them to be, or you're scared to share. So you just say, I'm fine. And it's a way of not going down a conversation that you don't want to go down because you're saying you're fine.
Yeah, that's a really good way of giving really tangible examples of how the behavior represents in our relationships. So now we're going to look at what's happening beneath the surface when people disconnect and share, Patty,
Sure.
on that.
When people are overwhelmed, the nervous system often shifts and freezes or shuts down response rather than a fight or flight response. This may look like guarded behavior is often a sign of overload, or emotional distance is frequently self protection. It's not rejection. A lot of people will retreat if they're feeling overwhelmed or overloaded, but it doesn't mean that they don't want to be with others. They just feel the need to retreat, to refocus, re energize, calm down the system.
Yeah, I think I grew up a lot with that. Going to my bedroom and hiding.
Yeah. For me, I was an only child and I enjoy being alone. It recharges me. And I know for a lot of people that might not be for them, but for me, I do like my time to be alone. It really soothes me.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction to look at. Is in general, we can say that somebody's more energized by being around people. Some people are more introverted, so they need that alone time, or they get energized by being alone. And some people are just not good at being alone.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing to start noticing what's actually happening for you. Are you energized by being alone, or do you start to make up stories that you shouldn't be alone and you're not comfortable being alone? And what could perhaps be going on for you about being alone and not being able to connect intimately as well? Because they're all clues later. We're going to talk about how to start reconnecting. So what came up for me as you were sharing about the reasons we go into self-protection is there's often a fear in the nervous system and in ourselves that something bad is going to happen. If we're overwhelmed or if we're around other people where we're not being able to be heard or understood, or we're not communicating what our needs are, maybe we have a perception we can't get our needs met. So we operate a lot when we go into self-protection mode or shutdown mode, that we can't actually get what we need from the other people around us. Sometimes that means we're thinking that how we present ourselves to others is actually not going to be perceived in a good way, or we're going to be perceived as not good enough. And we're preoccupied and worried about how others perceive us. So overwhelm and self-protection operate in two ways. Often we get overwhelmed because we think if we are truly ourselves with others, that something bad is going to be perceived, and that's why we feel like we can't be with others. And so that can lead us to disconnecting from others to a safer place where we feel we can get self-protection. So this is where the flooding can happen, because in the moment, if you think you're being misunderstood or that you're coming across wrong to others and that could lead to something bad, your nervous system is overstimulated trying to work out, how do I present myself to others to get my needs met, and I can't do that perhaps safely. So I need to withdraw. So sometimes that can result in an over responsive and nervous system. Some of us are hypervigilant, like myself, always hypersensitive, like I was picking up a lot in my environments. You might have other family members who are hypervigilant, always looking around to see what the parents are doing in case they're going to get in trouble, or trying to sense if there's danger in the environment. Kids often grow up in family environments where they may have conflict, or they may have a sense that of uncertainty if the parents are uncertain. So often we develop these nervous system responses that are overstimulated from our childhood upbringing. And if you weren't like Patty, where you were an only child and you had certain sort of parameters that were clear and you had safety in withdrawing, sometimes there's other dynamics that influence how your nervous system responds from a lot of stimulation in your home environment. Today, we have a lot of single child families, Patty. And a lot of children are raised to be dependent on devices. So also the devices, if whatever they're watching can be overstimulating to them as well. So relationships and how we relate to our devices are going to be huge in terms of reprogramming how our nervous system responds in future. I'll share an example of how this overstimulation can work when you're concerned about social expectations. I've got an example where, for example, you might have an invitation to a social event and you do want to be with the person who's inviting you. So it could be a friend or a colleague or someone, but you're starting to overthink about the expectations, the social expectations at the event, and they're starting to make you feel unclear about how you will feel in the future if you go to that event. Some people call it pre-ruminating. So some people ruminate about social expectations about the event before they actually get there. So they start to make up a lot of stories. I used to do this when I used to have a really great girlfriend. I always wanted to go out with her, but we were going to a party. So parties back in the 90s were different. They were kind of chaotic. They weren't structured. You didn't know what to expect. There might be people there that you didn't know. I would ruminate or fear forward about what was I going to wear, who was going to be there, if there was somebody there that I liked, and I was concerned about what they might think about me. I was worried about if I'd be successful in my social interactions. I wouldn't be cool enough. I'd be awkward. And that was just from my friend inviting me to a party. So I would start all these fantasy fears and also fears of maybe something good could happen. So I would cycle back and forth between the positive emotions and the fear-based emotions. And I was over-concerned about both. So if it was something positive as well, I'd manage to mess that up. Like, oh, if it's somebody I like and I want to be there, then that could turn out bad as well. It was really exhausting. I got exhausted from my nervous system fear projecting and also positive projecting, where that could also go wrong. And a lot of it basically was not feeling safe in my body. So sometimes now, because I don't have that same desire to meet someone or be cool in a social environment, I still find that the cycle of wanting to make people like me still operates. If I'm overcommitted, for example, and I want to say no to going out, I can find that I go into this story creation where I start to feel guilty if I say no, because I already said I was going to go and I want to retract that decision. I might feel guilt, or I feel like I want to just say no and I feel guilt about that. But it's a very different fear to when I was younger and I wanted to go out. However, the nervous system response is the same. It's fear, future forward fear creation. I think it's really interesting how with age things change, but the dynamic of the nervous system can be the same. So, Patty, can you share how some of these behaviours might show up in the work environment?
Withdrawing from conversations and avoiding hard conversations.
You may experience that you are in a conversation with a group or with an individual, and you're just feeling really, really uncomfortable because you don't want that conversation or you don't want to hear that conversation. You avoid, maybe at work, staying professional but emotionally disengaged, minimal sharing, and lack of participation. And I'll give you an example. Have you ever seen the show Vera?
Oh,
I've been watching the UK TV mystery show Vera, and Vera is a detective inspector, and she doesn't share any of her private life. And work is her whole life. She has no work life balance at all. Her interactions with her team are distance or at arm length, sometimes sarcastic, critical. When it comes to personal information about herself, she doesn't share it at all, and she is very uncomfortable when others share their personal information or invite her to go somewhere after work or go to a function. She was supposed to get an award and she didn't even show up to the award ceremony because she just doesn't like that kind. She likes her job. She knows she's good at her job, but she doesn't want the praise. With Vera's job and past, there is trauma with connecting, and she's very guarded. And here she's a leader, she's good at her job, but she doesn't connect with her team. She's good at drawing out people to talk to her about things with the job, but not personally with others herself.
yeah, she's a fascinating example.
Yeah. When you see her interaction, you can really see how the overwhelm and the job can jade somebody through the trauma that she sees in her daily life.
Yeah, so it's like overwhelmed from just all of the stuff that you're taking into your body from the environment, similar to what we said at the beginning
Yeah,
about our society. And she also had that personal journey with her father. So it's a very
right,
complicated history because she has one image of her father. And then during the series, you find out that he could be not so kind or such a upright individual. He definitely wasn't kind to her.
right.
So it's a lot about that guarded exterior is about how her father withheld a lot of himself from her as well.
Mhm.
It's a really interesting example, Vera. I think she's a great example. What an amazing actress.
Yes.
So now we're going to look at why overwhelm creates an intimacy disconnect. And I think Vera is a classic example from her parent. So, Patty, you've shared that had you were a single child, so you were energized by being alone. But also, I was wondering, like, when you grew up, did you need to take time out from your parents, or was that organized? Was that structured, or how did that flow in the home?
Well, both my parents worked, but my grandfather lived with us. So my grandfather was always there for me if I needed him. He was my babysitter, he was my confidant. He was a good role model as a a grandfather. He was more my father than my father was, because my father was working and stuff like that, and he had such a kind heart, and everybody in the neighborhood knew that my grandpa was there, so if there was anything that happened, he was like the grandfather of the neighborhood. So it was nice that he lived with us. He had tuberculosis, so he, at one point in his life, and he had to have his a lung and half a lung removed. So he couldn't really do much. They didn't have like the tanks that they have today where you can their little tanks. He had a huge tank that he was tethered to. But I had a good way in my life where I had him. I had my mom and dad too, but he was there for me whenever I needed him. And he gave me my space to be alone if I wanted to be alone.
So would you have learned what I'm asking is, say, people like in my childhood when I was overwhelmed, I had to work out what to do. I didn't have that grandfather wisdom or parents that interacted with me to tell me that's okay, just go and find your space to do that.
Mhm.
I taught myself that. And even because I didn't have the adult steering that process, there was anxiety about me removing myself. So if you were overwhelmed in your environment, were you able to sort of go to your grandfather and then ask for support, or how did that get orchestrated where you just knew, okay, I'm overwhelmed right now and I'm just going to remove myself and balance my overwhelm?
You know, Angela, I think it came naturally. I just felt like that's what I needed to do. You know, it was so long ago, but I just felt like I I required that. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah. Well, it happens a lot for people who grow up in a home environment where they're modeling. Like it sounded like your grandfather was a pretty grounded person where you could go to him, but you could also, he's not running around the house doing 1,000 things, stressed out himself. He has a
Yeah.
disease and he's managing that, but he's kind of accepted his status with the disease and he's like
Mhm.
an anchor for the community as well. So you probably modeled a lot of his groundedness in managing something. He was unable to control his disease, so he has to learn a few strategies of just accepting his situation and his body and his limitation,
Mhm.
plus also having oxygen when he needed it. So he's got his tools worked out. But also, it sounds like your home environment was pretty structured in some ways unconsciously. Maybe they weren't conscious about it. It was just like grandpa's there. Everybody in the neighborhood knows he's there. So those things are taken for granted. What happens when you have a more unpredictable environment is that often we don't know what's coming and we don't know how to deal with overwhelm. And I think sometimes as an adult, we think we should, if we're overwhelmed, we think we should have the verbal skill of being able to say, oh, right now I'm just being flooded or I'm feeling nervous. I'm just going to remove myself. And many times in my coaching work, I have worked with clients just to learn this skill, how to articulate, right now, I got to get out of here because I can't handle this. Because it's social expectation, you should be a certain way. You should be able to be
Yeah.
present and functional and verbal. And if that's not modeled for you, if you're not taught that it's normal to just withdraw, and if it's not modeled by an adult that is grounded and can be quiet or can handle overwhelm or is not too unpredictable, because all humans are unpredictable at times. But if you have volatile parents or parents who are one day stressed, one day more stressed, one day less stressed, you don't know what stress level they're going to have. It creates a natural overwhelm status in the child. So often the child will grow up with habits where they're unconscious and you just get used to not being able to learn how to withdraw yourself and how to verbalize to others how to withdraw. So one of the strategies that I've learned through you, Patty, is through the 21 Days of Optimal Life Work-Life Balance workbook. And in that, you get to explore how do you deal with things such as silence? What are your sleep habits? What are your actual daily life habits? Because often we grow up with these habits unconsciously, and it's very easy to disconnect from intimacy if you don't know what your habits are, because you just go into default patterns of maybe isolating yourself because everything gets too much, which is all to do with our conditioning from when we grew up, and we don't know how those habits are formed. We call it conditioning. You're often conditioned to behave in a certain way in the family environment and the home environment. And we just get used to those, and then we keep piling on more expectations when it comes to work. So, what I discovered from the 21 days to work-life balance, that there are certain things that I've developed as habits that actually help me with the overwhelm, but I didn't realize how helpful they were. And those are the sort of habits that will start to help manage when you get disconnected or when you get overwhelmed. And your habit can be to just disconnect quickly. You can learn actually what are those self-soothing habits that you have, or what are the habits that you've generated over time to either get out of conflict or get out of overwhelm. But also you can start to construct new habits that may be more suitable as you're getting older in your life, instead of just responding from the unconscious habits. So I've looked at how in the home environment we get conditioned, and I've also addressed how sometimes we have different childhood upbringings. So sometimes we have a single child household, or we have many children in the household, and that can affect how much you can withdraw yourself. The other thing I'm learning from single child households to households where there's more children is how much do your siblings, if you grew up in a group home, recognize your way of managing overwhelm? Because this is what I've noticed with some people who happen to be maybe a bit on the spectrum as well. If you have a different way of processing and your siblings don't accept that, they can isolate you or make fun of you or ridicule you. So that's also another thing. How much did your family support your different processing style? Did they support you when you needed to withdraw? Did they make fun of you? Did they force you to engage with family when you weren't really wanting to do that? Did they make you do certain family activities that make you really cringe? And this can be triggered over our holiday periods as well, Patty, because I see people push away family because it's just too triggering. And other people are like, yeah, bring it on. I want to be with family. And you handle the chaos, you handle the conflict of your value systems, because it's just about how you were encouraged to be with each other, and whether siblings, and maybe even adults, made fun of your needs to withdraw or your overwhelm patterns in the nervous system, or were they accepting of it and just going, oh, that's okay, they just need a bit of time by themselves. If your family doesn't accept the way you process, that's a really easy way to disconnect from intimacy, because you just feel like you can't be yourself. Patty, can you share about the work environment and how that manifests in disconnect?
At work, pressure to appear competent, calm, put together, but inside you feel much differently. So you have that pressure of masking, you might as well say, that you're calm and you're put together and you're confident and all of those things, but inside you're not feeling that. You nod your head in meetings while internally feeling confused, stressed, behind, or frustrated because you're in overload. You put on a smile on your face and stay professional even when you're feeling anxious, exhausted, or discouraged. How many of us have done that? You respond quickly to messages to seem responsive, even when you haven't had the time to think about what you really want to say in that message. And you shoot out something that probably wasn't as good as you wanted it to be. You're overprepared. You over-explain to avoid criticism and harsh judgment. You're trying to justify why you're doing what you're doing because you don't want to be criticized, right? You leave work feeling drained from maintaining the appearance of being calm and confident. How many of us have left the workplace and just felt totally exhausted because of everything that had went on during the day, and not taking a few minutes to get back to a calm level? Many of us have done that.
Yeah, it feels like the work environment has a higher expectation around performance, whereas the family, there are expectations of how the family should operate. But the work environment's about, are you performing? And if you're not performing as much as someone else, that's a competition. So now we're going to move to some solutions to reconnect. And it's a very common thing if you're disconnected from intimacy to feel like, I can't do it because I'm bad at it. And there's this craving for closeness, but you feel like you're far away from it because you can't do it. I'm not good at it. And that can be influenced by how your family made fun of your processing style when you grew up as well. If you're on the spectrum, sometimes people don't understand you. A lot of people with ADHD talk about how they were a certain behavior, were a certain way, and their family completely misunderstood them. And for people who are not neurodiverse, this also happens. You feel like you're an alien in the family and they just don't get how you think or your perspective. So you constantly want to be close in the family, but you end up manifesting a fear of closeness because you fear you won't be accepted. So we're going to look at some gentle solutions of overcoming this fear of, I can't connect, because you don't want to give yourself a goal that's extraordinary, like I should be this way. So my simple advice is to just create habits that encourage you to seek out intimacy. Because once you have established a pattern of disconnect, and I'm thinking about our dear friend Vera, she's so good at going home and opening her fridge. Nothing's in the fridge. And she gets out the bottle of whiskey and has a little toddy and sits there alone. But meanwhile, her work colleague is desperately trying to get her to come to dinner.
Yeah.
And then eventually we get that satisfying episode where she goes to dinner and gets to talk to the wife who knows all about her because she's amazing. She could go home to the empty fridge and the bottle of whiskey, or she could start a new habit and force herself to start connecting. And this has been sometimes what I work with clients. It's just really hard to reprogram yourself out of really embedded habits of isolation. But you have to try creating new habits. A coach like Patty or myself can help you create them and stick to those new habits if you need some accountability. The other thing is your perception about overwhelm as a sign that you can't connect. It's not true. You can see it as a sign that you need to understand and take time to reconnect to your body. Now, I'm a body-centered coach. I'm a body-centered person. I love listening to the body. For other people, that can freak you out. But maybe you can just have a mindset shift. If I'm in overwhelm, my body's trying to tell me something. What happens is, unfortunately, with overwhelm, the stories start to get out of control and your nervous system can start rolling those stories around in your head and you can't stop it. So if that happens, that's the other habit to start building, which is catching that the stories have started and I'm in a loop, recognizing you're in a loop, and find a habit to break the loop. I've seen some really creative people coming up with habits. Today we've got an affirmation, we've got a writing reflection question for you, and you can use those. I've seen other people watch YouTube videos to get them out of the loop, to help them see, I'm in the loop. Okay, how can I stop that loop? So there's 1,000 ways to break the loop, but you've got to try to break it. That's not you. That's just the nervous system on rapid cycle. And Patty, what can you share?
Yeah, having some structure when you feel yourself pulling back, ask for clear agendas before meetings. That can kind of help you feel more confident because you kind of know what's going to be talked about during the meeting. Request deadlines in writing so that you're not feeling overwhelmed because you don't know when this is due. Is this due immediately? Is this due in a week, 2 weeks? What your timeline is, so that it's not like feeling like this is an immediate thing that has to be done immediately. If it is, then you know. When you're checking in with your boss or coworkers, do a brief check-in instead of a lengthy discussion. That way, you're just briefly updating or briefly getting an update back so that you're at least connecting, but you're not having to really be so deep in the conversation, if that's helpful for you.
And when you say a brief check-in, you're checking in on the expectations or how you're meeting
Yeah,
their expectations. What's the
right.
actual goal of the check-in?
So, say you have a project, right? And you want to do a brief check in to let your boss know. Instead of them coming to you, you do a brief check in. Oh, this is where I'm at. And
Mhm.
them saying, oh, okay, thank you. Because maybe them coming and saying, come into my office, or they come to your desk might put you into overwhelm. But if you
Mm.
reach out and give them a brief check in, you're showing that you care, you're building a relationship, but you're not going into like a lengthy meeting or something like that. You're just checking in and saying, this
That
is where
take
I'm at. And
Yeah,
I just wanted to let you know what my progress is, type of thing.
great. That would give you an opportunity as well if you needed support to say, "This is where I'm
Yes,
at, but I need clarity about this piece."
yes,
Yeah.
yes. You know, I'm stuck here. Do you have any suggestions for me to move forward or things like that? So you're actually communicating so that you're not getting overwhelmed because you're sitting there not knowing what to do.
Okay, great.
All there it can be all different kinds of scenarios, but those are a few.
Yeah, that was very helpful because that's about seeking relationship, not running from
Yeah,
it.
avoidance. You're putting it forward so that you can move forward. Angela had talked earlier that we have a question for you if you want to journal about it or self reflect about it. The question is, what would a supportive connection look like this week for you? What tips would you take away from what we've talked about so far? Or what tips do you have for yourself so that you are connecting with others? And here are some examples for work and at home. Notice when you're overwhelmed without judgment. So, what are you going to do? You're overwhelmed. Are you going to take pauses? Are you going to pause between running from meeting to meeting so that you can take a moment and calm yourself down? Are you choosing rest over pushing yourself? Say you get home and instead of cleaning the house or doing something that, you know, is going to also put overwhelm towards you at that moment in time, are you going to choose to rest or are you going to keep pushing yourself? So just think about what supportive things you can do for yourself to help you with your overload and connecting with others.
Mhm.
And then we're going to talk about affirmations, which Angela had mentioned earlier. So, the affirmation for this podcast is, even when I feel overwhelmed inside,
I'm learning how to stay gently connected on the outside. Just repeat this. Whenever you're feeling overwhelmed, repeat and say this affirmation. You can write it somewhere, you can journal about it. Using affirmations really helps take the loop out of the way you're feeling and kind of ground you. What do you think, Angela?
Yeah, I love that affirmation actually. Even just reading it, I love the gently connecting on the outside. It just gives the energy of how I want to connect. And we have the Building Better Relationships meditation and journal where we focus on that, like, how do you want to be in the relationship? The energy of it, the feeling of it, we can just breathe and gently connect. Doesn't When I was talking about the parties that I used to go to in my younger days, I would freak out. So I couldn't think about gently anything. I was just thinking about all the other things that could go wrong. So when you say gently connect, I gently connected on the outside. It can just be a quiet way. You don't have to have conversation. You don't have to be performing in a specific manner. And you can come off as a goofball and be awkward socially, and it's not a big
It's
deal.
okay. Yeah.
So in closing, we just want to remind you that if you're feeling overwhelmed and guarded on the inside and guarded on the outside, you're not alone. It's actually a very universal experience. All people feel disconnected at times, and all people feel alone at times. Being in overwhelm, it's a common vulnerability to all people because we're social animals. So it's actually a normal response. And confidence, being confident and cool, it's actually not a natural state. It's a thing you have to practice and learn through doing. We sometimes think there's a magic pill and I can be automatically cool and groovy and people will like me. Actually, it's actually built over experience and overcoming fear. So it's not a natural state to be confident. So being overwhelmed can be a healthy nervous system response. It's you're responding to that desire to be connected to others.
I really love that, Angela.
Yeah.
Overwhelm doesn't mean we don't want to connect. It often means we need safety, clarity, and compassion. Yeah, thank you, Angela, for all your input on this subject. It's wonderful. In our next episode, we will explore Your Body Remembers the Fight, how old patterns shape new conflict. And Angela and I want to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to the next episode with you.
Thank you.